The Lotus Sutra, also known in Sanskrit as Saddhamma Pandurika Sutra, is thought to be the highest teaching in the Nichiren school. It may not be considered so high in the rest of Buddhism. When one thinks that its beginnings are in India, I believe there are very few commentaries in India about the Lotus Sutra. And it traveled from India to China, where Kumarajiva was one of the first to translate the Lotus Sutra into Chinese. He was thought to be such a gifted translator that he was imprisoned so he could translate the Lotus Sutra. At any rate, the sutra then traveled to Japan and possibly to Korea. And it is in this area, East Asia, where the Lotus Sutra achieves its stature as one of the major teachings of the Buddha. The Lotus Sutra was transmitted to Japan in about 500 BCE, and Prince Shotoku is thought to be one of the commentators of the Lotus Sutra and also used the Lotus Sutra as a foundation for governance. The Lotus Sutra was very highly prized. It was used as a form of literature. People copied it. Art rose around it. And it was found in many monasteries and convents throughout Japan. It was extremely well regarded. In Chinese, the Lotus Sutra is known as Miao Fa Lin Hua Xing. The Japanese pronunciation is Myoho Renge Kyo, and in English it is simply known as the Lotus Sutra. Now, one of the reasons that the Lotus Sutra is so important is because it is one of the early sutras to talk about the Buddha's enlightenment in such a way that all beings could achieve that same enlightenment. And indeed, the Buddha's advent was simply to cause all beings to enter the way and quickly become Buddhas. And one could do this simply by being exposed to the Lotus Sutra, by reading it, by learning from it, by copying it. So you found in Japan tons of people copying the sutra in order to gain merit, in order to advance their lives. And if one thinks about this carefully, one could really see that it was not a teaching that was available to everyone. Because when you think of having the ability to copy, to read, to share it, to create art, then you're talking about a class of people who have the resources in order to do that. And so it was a practice at that time for those who were well equipped financially and with the resources to take the time in order to promote the teaching. It was also a teaching that was well regarded specifically by women. And in the many convents, one of the major practices was writing or copying and making art around the Lotus Sutra. The Lotus Sutra also was the first teaching to talk about the one vehicle rather than three vehicles. And when we talk about the vehicles, we're talking about the Shravaka, Pratyeka, and Bodhisattva vehicles. The Lotus Sutra teaches that there is only one vehicle, of which all of them are a part. The sutra also addresses the timeless, eternal nature of Shakyamuni, the eternal Buddha, and suggests that all other Buddhas are manifestations of the eternal Buddha, that he neither is born nor does he die. He is always in this world continuously. The sutra establishes the 5 ways of practice: to receive and keep, to read, recite, to copy, and expound. Now, what does that mean? That means upon hearing the sutra or being given the sutra, that you keep to the teachings of the sutra. And that means to study it carefully, to read it continuously, And that's the second part of the practice, to read it. That you read it from cover to cover throughout the entirety of your life. Now, one may think that's an incredible goal to read a sutra for your entire life. One of the practices is to read a chapter a day every month, so that every month you are reading the entire sutra. And by this continuous exposure to the teachings contained therein, one begins to really understand and is able to keep the sutra. Reciting the sutra means to chant the sutra in its entirety or just in parts or simply by chanting the title in either Shindoku, which is the faith language, which is the Japanese pronunciation of Chinese, or in one's native language. And there's nothing, I think, more beautiful than hearing the sutra chanted in one's own language, be it English or Spanish or Italian. It is quite beautiful. And when one is able to chant in one's own language, then the relationship with the sutra becomes even more profound, because one is able to actually hear the words and capture its essence. The difference with chanting in Shindoku is that one really doesn't necessarily understand what the words are saying, but one does capture the rhythm, the flow, and the sound of the sutra being chanted. And all of these work together to implant the sutra, in your life. To expound means to share the sutra with everyone, not simply through words, but through one's life. And that goes back to keeping the sutra again. If you expound the sutra through your words, your thoughts, your deeds, then you are keeping to the sutra. Lastly, a very beautiful practice is copying the sutra. And this can be done, again, in one's native language, just simply copying it word for word. Or one can learn how to copy in sumi, in Japanese calligraphy, or Chinese calligraphy. Because when you copy the words, the characters of the sutra, you are indeed also writing the words into your life.